Today
We're
going to be going through the BACnet network. So the BACnet network is the most common network you're likely to have on a Facility Explorer project, and it'll allow you to talk to and communicate with any BACnet device, whether it is a BACnet MSTP or a BACnet IP device. Okay, so if I get my workbench up and running, so this is using the station that we created the other day, so the new JCI station, and as part of that selection we chose to have a BACnet network. So when the station is created, we have a BACnet network already sitting here waiting for us to use. So under the station, config, drivers, BACnet network. So the drivers folder is where all of the network connections or the networks reside, is under the drivers folder. If you didn't have a BACnet network there, you could double click on drivers and go new. So double click drivers and we're seeing the driver manager screen. We could click on new and we could add a new network. And this lists all of the available networks. Okay, and somewhere in there is a BACnet network. Okay, then we go OK, and we can give it a name, and so on. We've already got one BACnet network, and you only ever have one BACnet network in your station. Okay, so we've got our BACnet network, and if we expand it out, underneath we've got a local device, BACnet com monitor tuning policies. So if we double click the BACnet network, the screen we get is the BACnet device manager. Okay, and right now we're looking at an empty database, so no BACnet devices have been defined. And we've got a series of buttons down the bottom here, and one of them is discover. So at the moment, we can't discover any BACnet devices, it's grayed out. Okay, so that normally means we're not connected to a BACnet network. We don't have a valid connection, so therefore we can't go out and discover anything. So if I change my view to AX property sheet, I'm now looking at my BACnet network property sheet. And so working our way down this list, we've got the BACnet com section, and under that we've got a folder called network. So looking over here, we've got our folder called network. So our folder network, and then under network we have our IP port and our MSTP port. Again, when we chose our configuration, our new JCI station, we said we wanted to have a BACnet IP and a BACnet MSTP network. And so our BACnet network has both of those ports defined, IP port, MSTP port. If we look in the IP port, so we'll look at it from here, so double click. The IP port has a network number and a link. So the link has a section called adapter. So this is your network adapter, or your network interface card, your NIC. So in this case, when I drop down this list, I see all of the network cards that are on my Windows PC. Okay, and I choose this one, the Realtek USB. Okay, if you do that on your PC, you'll see all of the network cards on your PC. I choose that one and I save it. It goes out to that card and reads the IP address that I've got configured in Windows. So that's my Windows IP address. I can't change it in here. I can't edit that field. The only way I can change that is to go into Windows and change it. So that's a Windows parameter. Okay, so that's my IP address. Then the UDP port that I'm going to use to communicate on. So when you communicate using IP, you have an IP address and you have a port number. So the standard BACnet port number is BAC0. So in hex, it's BAC0. And if you get a programming calculator up and you go hex BAC0, the decimal for that is 47808. So the BACnet port is 47808. Okay, and that's the standard BACnet port. And in here you could go 47808, and that would be exactly the same result. Okay, and nearly every BACnet project you'll do, you'll use the standard BACnet port of 47808. There might be a situation where for some reason you need to use a different port number, in which case you would put the different port number in there, like 4809. But every other BACnet IP device would also have to change its IP port number to 47809. Okay, so for this example, we'll leave it standard at 47808. Okay, so we save that. The other thing that's important here is the network number. So in BACnet, every object in BACnet is identified by its type and an ID number, and the ID numbers are between 0 and 4 million. Okay, so there's a big range of ID numbers, but they typically need to be unique. So every network on a site, on a BACnet IP site, every network needs to have a unique identifier. So if we choose a unique identifier for our IP network, let's call it 1001. Okay, and we'll save it. But it could also be just as easily be 1024. It can be basically any number, but you can't have two networks with the same number. Okay, so let's leave it at 1024. We save it. So that's our BACnet IP port. Its status at the moment is disabled. To enable it, we right-click on the IP port, go Action, Enable. And now its status is OK. We could also have gone here, right-click, Action, Enable would do the same thing. But that's when we first create it, it's disabled. And we have to right-click and enable it. Right-click, Action, Enable. So now it's enabled. Its status is OK. So we now have a working BACnet IP port. If we go back to our BACnet network, we still can't discover. Okay. So the next thing we have to do is to look at our local device. So the local device, so in the BACnet network, the FX80, or in this case, my computer, will appear as a BACnet device. Okay, and this local device folder here represents this FX80 as a BACnet device. Okay, and so if I double click on that, I'm looking at the property sheet, and these are all of the properties of the local device, of the BACnet device. So when the BACnet network looks at my PC, they will see this BACnet device. And the first thing they look at is the object identifier, which again is the device, is the type, device, and the ID number. So -1 is not a valid ID number. I have to give it a valid ID number. And that can be any number you like, between 0 and 4 million. So, but the number has to be unique. So there can be only one device 902.1.0 in the network. Okay, so I've just assigned it that device ID number. Okay, and now its status is now okay. Okay, so my local device is valid. My IP port is valid. When I look at my BACnet network, I now have the option to discover. Okay, if I click discover, I get to go out and discover all of the devices on the network, starting with device number 0 and going through to device number 4,194,302. So that's the maximum ID number for BACnet. Okay, and which network do I want to go looking on? So the network I create, my IP network, is 1024. If I had an MSTP network defined, it would be listed here as well. Okay, but I only have my IP set up at the moment. So I select my IP network and I go OK. So it's now looking for all devices on my BACnet IP network. Okay, and it's discovered a device on network 1024 with device ID number 523231 at that IP address on that port. The vendor is Johnson Controls. The model is NAE 35, and there's 92 objects underneath that BACnet device. Okay. So device number 523,232. So if I do my discover again, and I have a low limit of 600,000. Okay, so I'm looking for everything from 600,000 up to 4 million. And I go OK. You'd expect to not find that device because its device number wasn't in the range. So when I go discover, by going 0 to 4,194,000, I get everything. But I can narrow down that search if there's a particular device I'm looking for, and I don't want to go and search the entire space. I can do that. Okay, so we'll search again, but this time, if we have a maximum of 600,000, 100,000, yep, we would expect to now find that device. Okay, so there's the device. I've found it. I can select it and I can choose add, which will add this device to my BACnet network. Okay, it's got a name, which I discovered from the device. It's got all of these, it's got device ID number, a network number, IP, and so on. All of that information was discovered. So I go OK. And now in my database, I've got a single BACnet device created called NAE demo. If I look at my BACnet network now, my BACnet network has a single device called NAE demo straight underneath it. All right. If I wanted to, I could create a folder. So in my network here, just say I could create a new folder called Building A. Okay, so now I've got a folder called Building A. I'll delete this device. I'll double click Building A. And with inside Building A, I'll go Discover. Okay. There's my NAE demo again. And I can add it. If I wanted to, I could change the name to NAE Building A. Okay. And now I've created the NAE is in a folder called Building A. So if you had 100, 1,000 BACnet devices, listing them all underneath the BACnet network would be confusing. So the first rule is to create some structure, you can use folders. So it's important that when you go to the root of the BACnet network, you've got a folder Building A, and within this device manager, I create a new folder called Building B. Now I've got 2 folders and so on. Okay, and I can have further folders underneath, like level 1, level 2 if I need to. So back to Building A, I've mapped in this NAE, and by mapping in this device, I automatically get all of these folders created. So every device has a folder called points. If I double click points, I get the point extension manager view. But if I drop that down, I can change that to the BACnet point manager. And then in here, I've got the discover button. Okay, so I can discover BACnet points. So this goes out, connects to the NAE, and discovers all of the points. Okay. So there they all are. And so if you know anything about Metasys, you'd recognize that that name there that we've discovered is the full item reference for the point. So it's the NAE name, field bus, device name, point name. So the zone temperature on BAV-CLG on field bus MSTP1. Okay, if I add that point. I can give it a name like BAV cooling zone temperature. It's a numeric point, and I go OK. So there I've mapped that point. It's reading the value as 0 degrees and its status is OK. Okay, so that point is now online. If I wanted to create some structure under here, so now that point is listed directly under the points folder. But I could just as easily create a new folder called BAV LG. Okay, so now I've got a folder. Double click that folder. And then with these discovered points, I could map all of these BAV cooling points . Okay, so I've marked all of those points. I can add them. And they're listed there as a big list. And they'll all come in with all of these long names involved. Okay. So I might cancel that and just add one point. And instead of using that full name, I could just use that name. Okay, there's my zone temperature. I could add my minimum cooling. And again, I delete everything there except for that. And so on. If I work my way down to my zone just say I wanted to make that, at the moment that point is a numeric point, so I cannot command it. But if I map this one in, when I add it, if I choose to map it as a numeric writable point, I have to enable it and go OK. It's now a point that I can command. Okay, so now when I right click, I can go action and set the value 24. And it says write access denied. Okay. So what that's saying is that if I look at this point at our property sheet, there's a section here called proxy extension. So this is all about the mapping of this point, the BACnet mapping. Okay, and the most important thing here is the object identifier, which is analog value, is the type, and the ID number, which is 3,000,080. Okay, and the property that we're mapping, which is the present value. So right now when I go and try and command this point, I try and override it to 50. For 15 minutes and go OK. So I've just written the value 50 at priority override, which is priority number 8. So that's the command I just sent. But present value for this AV is read only, right? So I'm getting write access denied coming back from the BACnet device that I've connected to. Okay, so what we can do here is governed by what the BACnet device in the field will let us do. Okay, so the BACnet device in the field has an AV point with that number and a property present value, and we can read that value successfully, but we cannot command that value. We can't write to that value, because when we do, we get a fault saying write access denied. Okay. Now we may be able to go, instead of mapping the present value, if we map the relinquished default value, let's see if we can save that. And let's go here, right click, action, send the write command again. And still we got write access denied. Okay, so in these instances, we can't control this particular AV point. Okay, and that's because of the device in the field. Okay, there's nothing we can do at this end to change that. All right. Now, if we go here back to this device, and so if we go and discover again all of our points, now looking at all of these points from the NAE, there's a point called programming AV4. Now I'm pretty happy that we can probably write to that value. Okay, so if we add it, and we'll call it test AV4, and we'll make it a numeric writable point. We'll enable it, and we'll go OK. All right, so there it is. We've successfully read the value. And if we right click, action, set the value to 25, go OK. It changes to 25. We don't get any error. It's all good. Okay, so this one we're trying to write to something that's not writable, and we're getting write access denied. This one we're writing something that will accept the write command, and we're getting back status. So the moral is this point here can't be commanded. So if we delete it by right click, so if we double click and try and edit it, we can't change the type once it's defined, right? So we can't change it to just numeric. The only way to change that is to delete it and put it back again. So we right click and delete. It's gone. If we find that point again, which was this one here, heating, we right click, we select it, go add, leave it as a numeric point, go OK. And now we're successfully reading that point, but it's read only. And if we right click on it, we don't get any action. So let's look at this folder as a property sheet. So here's that folder. The zone temperature is a numeric point. So it's a read-only point. It's got the same proxy extension fields. It's got the mapping, which is analog value 3,000,078, property ID, present value. It's read-only, and it's only got one property, which is the out property. If we compare that to the test AV4 that we created, the top one is a numeric point. The one below is a numeric writable point. It's got the same proxy extension for mapping, but it's also, and it's got the out value, and then it's got a series of inputs, 16 followed by a fallback. So in 1 is the highest priority, so that's writing at priority 1. Okay, in 2 is writing priority 2, 3, 4. In 8 is writing at priority 8, which is the operator override. So if I right click on this test AV point and I go action, I've got emergency override and I've got override. If I choose override to 60 and I go OK, I've just put a command at priority 8, and that command has been sent to the device because that's the highest priority command. Okay, operator override priority 8. If I go to input number 6 and I set a value, 66, the write value is 66. And the NAE has rejected that priority. Okay, so again, what happens in the field can override what happens here. Okay, let's try to right click, action, emergency override. And we'll put in the value 70. In this case, emergency override comes in at priority 1, which is the highest priority. Nothing can override that. It gets sent at that priority, and the NAE accepts it at that priority. Okay. So if we take away, so to remove this 66, I set it to null. And save it. So it's now sitting at null. I have my emergency override at 70, my operator override at 60, and my fallback at 25. So right now 70 is the highest priority. If I right click, action, emergency auto will release that 70 command, yep. So it's released and it falls back to 60. And the 60 is sent at priority 8, which is the override priority. Okay, if I right click, action auto, which is releasing the override, go auto, the priority 8 is now null, and we fall back to the value of 25. And that's what's been written. Okay, if I come in here at priorities, say 14, and give it a value 140, and save it, it gets commanded at 140, and we read the value back 140, and that was successful. So it looks like for an NAE, we can operate at priorities 6, which is operator override, and above. So 7, 8, 9. So we can do something at priority 7. Sorry, cancel that. 7 won't work for us because it's above the operator. So the operator override is 8. So if we go to 9, set this to 90 and save. We can write the value and then read it back. Okay. To release that priority, we just set it to null. Save it. It goes back to 140. To release that, we set it to null and save it. And we go back to 25. Okay. So this is a numeric writable point. And these are the right priorities for commanding that point. Okay. Is there any questions on any of that so far?
What's the difference between set and override, David?
Okay, so set. So if we right click, action, set, and we go, say, 29, we're setting this fallback priority, which is the lowest priority of all. Okay, so it's setting the lowest priority value. Okay, so when all other commands have been released, this is the value that will persist. Okay, so typically if you had a wire sheet and you've got some automation that does a calculation and commands a value, like a supply air reset or something like that, typically you'd make those connections at priority 16 or 15, and then if that automation, if you wanted to remove that automation, you'd break that connection and you'd set it back to null, and it would default back to whatever the fallback value is. in this case 29. So when you right click and set, you're setting a value with no priority. Okay, so override will override the set value, and emergency override will override the override value. Yep. And so from an automation point of view, you can have automation that operates in the 9 to 16 range. Any of those commands can be overridden by the operator override, which comes in at 8. Above 8, so from 2 to 7, you can have automation that overrides the operator. So things like a fire alarm or those sorts of things. So that means that the operator can override it, but still an automation process can come in over the top and take control of that output. Okay. The operator emergency override, which is priority 1, nothing can beat that. So if you right click, go action emergency override to 100, there's nothing that can beat that command. Okay. So if we go back here, and we've got programming AV1. If we add that point, go okay, we'll call it test AV1. Okay. We double click this folder and we view it as a wire sheet. We see those 5 points that we've created as 5 connections. So this AV1 that we just mapped, it's mapped as a numeric point. This one is numeric writable, and it's got available connections here. So I can take this value out of here and connect it there. So now this point is driving this point. So this value here is coming in at priority 16. If I double click here, there's my input coming in at priority 100. My fallback is 29, but my override at priority 1 is 100. So it's the priority 1 value that's surviving. If I right click here, action emergency auto, releases the priority 1 value of 100, and now input 16 value of 200 is written. Okay, and if you notice, if we go back here, this value is changing. It's at 100, and in a minute's time it'll be 200, and this will change with it. So we've set up a bit of automation that says when this value changes, this value will change. Okay, so now it's 200. Now that's 200. Okay.
David?
Yep.
Would you be covering the auto tagging and haystack topic in this section or a different one?
We will cover a little bit of it in this one. Yeah, we will.
Okay, second question is with regards to the device number, the network numbers and all that.
Yep.
Is there any recommendation or tips or tricks when we're doing commissioning guidelines on how to do this numbering?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the device number is important. So this is our BACnet device called NAE Building A. And when we look at that point, it has a device number of 523231. So that device ID number is coming from the BACnet device in the field. All right. We don't get to set that number. That number is coming from the device. So whoever set up the device, in this case the NAE, they choose that number. Okay. Now that number needs to be unique across the entire site. Okay. In the Metasys world, those numbers are typically set automatically to make sure that they're unique. But when you have a system where it's a multi-vendor, where lots of different suppliers are providing controllers, the device ID number can be anything, but it typically has to be set in the device. Okay, so if you're programming up a VAV controller to load into a PCV control, as part of that programming exercise, you need to allocate a device ID number. And that ID number needs to be unique for the site. Okay, so if it's an MSTP device, it'll have a dip switch that'll be set to something like from 4 through to 127. Somewhere in that range, it'll have its MAC address in the range 4 to 127. So typically for a device ID number, if its MAC address was 25, you might make it 1025 for trunk number 1. The same device on trunk number 2, you'd make it 2025. And then if there's trunk number 3, 3000, and so on. So you can have trunk numbers and then have device numbers. But at the end of the day, your device numbers need to be unique across the entire site. Okay. And likewise, your network numbers. So when we set up our BACnet network, we have in our BACnet com, we've got our IP port. That IP port has got a network number. And if we look at our MSTP port, we double click there, it will also have a network number. So that one IP was 10024. We could make this 10025. If it's an MSTP port, it'll also have a port number. So COM1, if it was an FX80, it would be either COM1, COM2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, depending on which physical port you've connected to. So the first RS485 port on the FX80 is COM1, the second one is COM2. For 3 and 4, you need an expansion module. And for 5 and 6, you need a second expansion module. So the COM port provides the physical connection on the FX80. The baud rate is typically 38400. That's the standard for BACnet. The MSTP address 0. So this is the MAC address of the FX80 when it connects to the MSTP trunk. Okay, so just like every other device on that trunk, the supervisor has to have a MAC address. And typically for a supervisor, the MAC address is 0, but it doesn't have to be. It could be any number in the range 0 to 127, but typically it's address 0. Okay, if you had 2 supervisory devices sharing the same MSTP trunk, then you'd have to make sure that one of those, those 2 supervisory devices have unique MAC addresses. So you'd have to change one of them from 0 to something else. Okay. So if we save that, and again, if we right click action enable, okay, so I enabled it, but now I got a fault. And the reason for that is that this station is running on my PC, and my PC doesn't have a working COM port called COM number 1. Okay, so that's why that didn't work in this instance, but if it was on an FX80, then it would work. Okay, so that's my MSTP port. Similarly, this is my IP port. If I had a second MSTP port, I would right click here. Sorry, I just deleted it. All right. I would right click and choose duplicate, and I'd call it MSTP port. I'd call it number 2. I'd rename this one to be port number 1. Okay. He was 10025. This guy will be 10026. And he'll be COM2. And away we go. Okay. You only ever have, well, you typically only have one IP port, but on a FX80 you have two IP connections, 2 physical ports. Each one of those has its own IP address, and if you wanted to, you could have 2 BACnet IP networks, one on port 1, physical port 1, and the other on physical port number 2. In that case, you would duplicate the IP port, and in there you would choose a different adapter. Okay. So if I go back to my BACnet network now, and if I discover, I don't get to see these 2 MSTP ports because they're not actually working. If they were working, they would be listed here as 1025 and 1026. And I could choose just to go and discover devices on just those individual networks if I wanted to.
David?
Yep.
So in this examples, we are having an virtual FX80 on the workbench, right?
Yep.
So is it possible to define FX80 offline, or do we need to have the FX80 online in the workbench, and only then we can define all these ports.
So right now, what I'm creating here is an FX80 database, okay, or configuration. And so when I'm finished, I can go to my platform and do a station copy, where I copy this configuration and copy it into an FX80, okay, at which point it'll start running inside the FX80. And at that point, this MSTP port 1 would now start functioning because it would have a valid COM1 that it can connect to. And likewise for port 2, it would connect to COM2. The IP port would be wrong because this link here is the link on my PC, okay? Whereas in the FX80, it would be either port number 1 or port number 2. And so you may need to go in there and check that that link is correct when you download it to an FX80. So the answer is yes, you can build the FX80 in Workbench on your PC, and you can sort of do 99% of the project of the work in Workbench on your PC. Then you copy it over to the FX80 on site, at which point you then have to go through and make minor changes like this one, where you choose the BACnet IP, you set up the BACnet IP port correctly for that FX80.
All right, and
Okay.
And for the points, do we need to always auto discover the points, or is there any way to define these points in Excel and import it in later?
There are ways to define the points offline rather than discovery, okay? And that's what we're about to do now, okay? So we've just been through building A, and we've got an NAE, okay? So this is a BACnet IP device, the NAE. Now just say on building A, we had some, if this is an FX80, and we have some PCV controllers on level 1. Okay, so under building A, we can create a new folder called level 1. Okay, and then we can go into level 1. And if we were actually on an FX80 and we had an MSTP trunk that was running, we could go and discover devices and discover points. But another way we can do it is we can just say new. We add a new BACnet device and we give it a name, BAV 0101. Okay, and if we knew what its device ID number was, we could put it in there, device ID 25. If we knew what network, if it's on MSTP port number 1, what was that? 1025. And if it was MAC address 25, and so this device ID number needs to be unique, so we could call it network 1025 device 25. Okay, MAC address 25. Okay. So now I've created that device, and initially it's there, status is okay, but it'll work out pretty soon that it's not actually, doesn't actually exist, and it'll go offline. Okay. So there is no device out there with those parameters. But nonetheless, I've created a device, and underneath there, I've got a points folder, and it's empty. And if I go to my point manager, if I try and discover it, it'll time out. Nothing will happen because there's no device to discover. But if I go back to my level 1, and I go to, it came up with the device manager. If instead I go to the JCI BACnet import manager, okay, BACnet import manager, it's listed there, okay? And if I double click, I get this screen that comes up that's asking for a resource file. Yeah. I go looking on my C drive. And I find a VAV CAF file. Okay, so the CAF file is the file that we get when we program up the VAV. I select that CAF file. Okay. So the resource file is the CAF file I use to program the VAV. It recognizes that that's a standard VAV configuration with SI units. It's got a graphic, a standard graphic that'll suit that VAV. And if I say create a new graphic, true, create a HX graphic, true, and go OK, it's now gone and imported that CAF file, and that VAV is no longer listed in my import manager. If I go to that VAV and go to the points, all of the points have been defined. So those points came out of the CAF file, okay? If I double click the VAV, I get a graphic. And it's the standard graphic to match that CAF file. And it's mapped all of the points. So the zone temperature here is mapped to the zone temperature there. Okay. So the process we followed was we went to the level, BACnet device manager, and we created a new device called VAV 0102. Okay. We go in here. Oh, sorry, I created a folder. Sorry, so I'll delete that. Click the wrong button. So I'm level 1, and I create a new device. So new BACnet device, called BAV 102, device ID 102526, network 1025, MAC address 25, and OK. So there we go. It'll wait. It's just going out and trying to connect to that device, and it'll fail eventually. Okay, so now we've got BAV 0102 created. All right. If I go back to level 1, and instead of looking at the BACnet device manager, I look at the JCI BACnet import manager, and that VAV that I just created is sitting there waiting to be imported. So I select it, go edit, make this bigger so that I can select my resource file, same file, open the file, create a graphic, go OK. It's no longer available to import. When I look at it now, it's full of points. Double click, it's got a graphic. Okay. So level 1, BACnet device manager, add a new device, AV 0103, device 102527, network 1025, address 27. Okay, so there it is. If I look at it over here, there's no points. Double click, no points. Over here, there's points. This one, there's no points. I go back to level 1 and choose my import manager. I select it and edit, make this bigger. Choose my resource file, which is the CAF file for the VAV. Go open, create a new graphic, and go OK. So now I've got points and I've got a graphic. Got a graphic for 103, 102, 101. Okay.
So this only works for our own CAF files, and how about Medisys CAF files?
Sorry?
How about MS controllers CAF files?
Medisys CAF files, yes, it'll work for any CAF file. So CAF file is Johnson Controls technology, I guess. Yeah, so it can be Medisys CAF file, or it can be an FX PCB, PCG CAF file. Any CAF file will work. If you create a CAF file and it's a custom application, so you didn't use the system selection, you just went, you chose a custom application and started with a blank page and built it all from scratch, the import will still work. It'll import all of the inputs and outputs that you've created. But what it won't import, it won't be able to find a standard graphic and a standard application because it's not standard, if that makes sense, yeah? So if you had a third-party BACnet device, so if we went new BACnet device and it was some special FCU, right? And it might be device ID 102.528, network 1025, MAC address 28. Okay. If we went to the points here, we could go to the point manager and we could add a new point called numeric point. And we could call it ZN zone temperature, analog input. So in order to map this, I would need to know what the analog input number was, or the AV number, or the AO number. Okay, so analog input number 3021, for example. Go OK. Now I've mapped a point. So provided I know the mapping, which is this AI and the number, provided I know that, I can manually map a BACnet point. Okay, I can give it a name, I can map it, and away we go. So if you had a third-party device, then as part of that documentation, you should have this mapping table that says analog input and the number, or analog variable and the number, and so on. Yeah?
David?
Yep.
Can we using the discovery for the third-party device?
You definitely can. So if you had a third-party device, you would wait till you got to site. You would discover it. So you would probably, if it was on site, you would go level 1, and you'd come here and you'd go discover, and it would have 1025, the network 1025 would be available here because it's the MSTP trunk that the device is sitting on. You'd tick that, you'd go OK, it would go out, discover it, and then the third-party device would appear here. Okay. You could select it, and then actually if we'll just discover and go OK. And this will find the NAE from before, but it would find the BACnet device would show up. If you had already added it here back in the office as the special fan call unit, what you can do is select it there, select it here, and go match. Right, at which point it gets all of these parameters and loads them into here. So the device ID is that, the network is 1024, the MAC address is that, and away we go. Okay. So now when we go to our special fan coil unit, we've got a point here called analog input 3021, and it's offline because inside that NAE there is no point called that. But we can go to our points folder and look at the point manager, BACnet point manager, and then I can discover the points. So it's still running. Okay, let's try that one more time. Discover. I think the problem I have is I've mapped it twice, so this is not a good example. But in reality, you would go, yeah, if you had a third-party device, the best way to do it is to discover it on site. Once you've mapped it, then go to its points, BACnet point manager, and discover the points, and they would be listed here, and you could add them here, which is essentially what we did for this one here. And let's just see whether discovery works in this case. Yeah, so that's what discovery looks like. Select the points you want, and then you add it. Okay. So if I show you that import process again, but this time if I say I'm in CCT, so you probably recognize this as CCT. If I go new, and I go OK, I'm going to create a new system called an AHU 01, air handling unit, mixed air, single duct, metric. OK. My selection wizard. Variable speed fan with fan status. Don't have a return fan. Got economizer dampers. I've got a preheat coil, got mixed air, proportional hot water valve, cooling, chill water valve, proportional actuator, reheat with hot water, no humidification, no dehum. Go next, go finish. So that's the program that's just been created from that system selection I did. If I save that, and I'll save it into C drive, downloads, and call it AHU01. Go save. Now, if I go back to my workbench, back to level 1, BACnet device manager, new device, BACnet device called AHU01. 1025.29, network 1025, MAC address 29. Okay, so there's my new device. Now I go to the import manager, and that new device is sitting there, and I edit, make this bigger, choose my resource file, and it was going to be in C drive, downloads, AHU01, so that's the CAF file I just created. I open that, create a new graphic, go OK. This is my AHU. These are all the points. This is my AHU graphic. Okay, and all of that came from that standard system selection that I did. And all of the options I chose, like a preheat coil, a reheat coil, chill water coil, and so on. Economy dampers, static pressure, variable speed fan, and so on. Okay. Now, we talked about tags before. So when we create a standard application, as part of that standard import process, we also get standardized tagging. Okay, so if we look at the outside air temperature on this air handling unit and we right click, we get the option to edit tags, and we can see that the tag for outside air temperature sensor has been added to this object. Okay, along with these other implied tags. Okay, and likewise, if we look at our VAV zone temperature, edit the tag. It's got the zone temperature tag added to it. All right. So if you use these standard applications, you will get standard tagging included with those. If we right click and view the tags for this guy. Yeah, so it's also tagged that as a VAV single duct cooling only. Okay, if we go down here and look at our air handling unit, edit the tags. It's an AHU single duct mixed air, chill water cooling, hot water heating. So those standard tags. Okay. So are there any questions on the importing that we just did? Okay, so if we had to do 7 more VAVs on level 1, we could go through that same process. Or another way we could do it is that once we've got a VAV defined and working, and we're happy with it, including the tagging and all the rest of it, we can select that VAV, right click and duplicate. And it'll be added in as VAV 104. So there's VAV 104. Double click. We're looking at VAV 104. It's got the same points. Everything's the same. The only thing that's different is when we look at our BACnet device manager, it's sitting in there as device unknown. So -1 means I don't know what that device is. And I could leave it there like that, and I could add, right click and duplicate, add 105, right click, duplicate 106, or I could right click, copy, right click, paste special, copy 4 of them, 105, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've got my 10 VAVs. Job done. VAV 10, graphic, VAV 9, VAV 8, and so on. Now what I could do, so I've done all this in the office, off-site, it's all working. I go to site, I'm connected to my FX80, and I go and discover all of my BACnet devices. I choose the MSTP trunk that I want. I go OK, goes out, and it finds all of these VAVs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They all get listed up here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3 are already mapped. Okay, so these would come online because their device ID is correct, their MAC address is correct, their network number is correct, everything's fine. The other ones would be listed up here. And what I could do is I could select it, the one I want, select the one I want down here, and then go match. And what that does is it gets the field values of device ID, network number, MAC address, and it applies them to this database device called VAV104. And I go OK, and it would come online. Then I'd select the next one up the top here, select the next one down the bottom here. When I've got two things selected, I can match them and do it again. Okay, so the workflow for a typical project is you can build all of this offline, you can go to site, discover all of the devices that you've got, and then go and match them up. Match, 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 match. They all match up, they all come online, and away we go. You've got a working system. Okay. And then when I've got level 1 done, I can right click and go duplicate, and I've got level 2. And level 2 has got 10 VAVs, a special fan coil unit, and 1 air handling unit, all ready to go. Double click. None of them have been set up with device IDs that are correct. I would go discover all of my devices. For whatever trunk level 2 was on, I would make sure I selected that. All of my level 2 VAVs come up. I select the one I want. I select the device I want, and I match. I go match and then OK. And this, now all of these VAV 101, because they're level 2, they should probably be called VAV instead of 0101, they should be 0201. They should. Okay. So what I can do here is I can select them all and go edit. And there they are, all selected. But I can't rename them. That's a bit of a problem. Instead, I would have to go So I have to rename them individually. So I'm just selecting it up here, adding it down there, going OK. So now I've renamed those ones. I want to rename the rest. Edit. One at a time, go. And so on. Another way I could do the same thing is to right click here, action, rename 208. Right click, rename 209. Right click, rename 210. Okay. Okay, and then we would go to site and do the matching up. Yep. So any questions on that side of it?
Looks good.
Okay, good. Now we can.
David,
Yes.
I have some question regarding the VAV.
Yep.
So if we are using the IP VAV, the 1930,
Yes.
is it possible to use a TE730 as a SA bus devices?
Yes.
How do we do that? Because for the 1930 it's a 6-pin and for the TE730 is a 8-pin.
Yeah. So that's yeah, that's sort of not part of this course. So
maybe we can come back later.
yeah. Yeah. So that's a very specific issue about a specific controller. So yeah, I might talk to you about that offline and then we'll work out
A solution.
Yeah, yeah. Like
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Thanks, David.
Jinket,
Yes.
topics not related to the training, please send an email to Asia Tech Support and they'll get back to you.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so just now we went through a lot of work on creating level 1, and then we duplicated all of that for level 2, and we can just as easily duplicate it for level 3, and so on. Okay. Now, we'll just, if we go back and have a look at our first VAV that we created, VAV1, if we double click, we're seeing a graphic here, okay? And if we top right, it says graphic is our view. If we go down, we can see the property sheet for that controller. And in our property sheet, we've got the things like the address, the network number, the MAC address, and so on. And we've got here a graphic reference, which points us to a file called VAV0101 graphic. And if we look at that file there, so this arrow will take us to that file. So now we're looking at files, graphics, VAV101 graphic.px. Okay. And if we edit that graphic, we can see all of the points in that graphic, like the zone temperature and so on. So what that means is, if we go back to our property sheet view, there's a slot here called graphic, and that's where this came from. So this reference here, graphic, is due to that item there called graphic. If I view that graphic, this is what I see. Yeah. So is there a question just now? Okay. Keep going. So we're viewing the graphic associated with this VAV.
Sorry, David, I have a question.
Yep.
Yeah, therefore regarding for the graphic itself,
yep.
Does it a CAD file original graphic is those HX type or PX type? Does it matters when we are going to view on the web later on?
So if we, yes, it does matter. So this item up here, if you click on that, you will see it'll change it to browser mode. So you'll see what you see when you're in a browser. So if I click that, it doesn't like that graphic. But if we go to graphic, the HX graphic, still doesn't like it. What is that? So I think that's possibly due to my PC settings. Let me have a look. Okay, let's see if that helps us. No. Okay, so if I show you the browser, so I'm running a browser on my PC. If I go to localhost 8080, so localhost :8080, so that's port number 8080, and I log in. Okay, so the reason it was 8080 was because in my web service, I changed my port number to 8080. Okay. So now I'm logged into the station using a browser. If I expand my config, drivers, BACnet network, building A, level 1, VAV number 1, double click. There's my graphic for VAV number 1, number 2, number 3. If I go to fan core unit, I don't get a graphic because no graphics defined. Go to my AHU, I get my graphic, yeah? So if I go back to Workbench and view the same items, that's basically the same graphic, yeah? Now, at the moment, if I look at my property sheet, I'm looking at graphic 0101. If I look at VAV number 2, property sheet, I'm looking at a graphic called VAV 102. Likewise for 103. If I go to 108, which is one of the ones I created by duplicating, if I view his property sheet, I'm looking at graphic VAV 0103. Okay, and likewise, if I go to level 3, 209, and view my property sheet, I'm also looking at a graphic called VAV 0103. So if I come down here to my files, graphics, under here I've got a series of graphics here for VAV 101, 102, and 103. Okay, and all of these graphics are the same, and it turns out to be that 103 is being used a lot. Okay, so the same. So in a typical job, rather than having one graphic for each VAV, you could just have a standard graphic. Okay, so instead of having VAV 0101, let's just rename it as graphic, VAV graphic. Okay, and then this guy, we rename him VAV graphic 2, and this guy will rename him VAV HX. Okay, so we've changed the three. So now when I go and look at VAV 101, I get an error because I can't find that graphic. If I go to my property sheet, I can go graphic, VAV graphics, right? And same for in here. Graphic 2. Same for in here. Okay, so now when I go here, I see a graphic. And the graphic I'm using is this one here. All right, now, because we haven't done a lot of work yet, we can safely delete all of these guys. Right click, sorry. Right click, delete, right click, delete, right click, delete. And we'll get rid of these ones as well. Right click, delete. So we're back to level 1 with a single VAV. And instead of calling it VAV 0101, let's just rename it VAV 01. Okay. And then call it, instead of calling it AHU 01, we'll just call it AHU because we know it's on level 1, so we don't have to call it 01. Okay. And while we're at it, we'll put the AHU, we'll reorder level 1 and put the air handling unit up the top, and we'll put the special fan coil unit second, and then VAV 01 like that. Okay, then we can copy this. Now we can paste, then we can select the level, right click, paste special, and make 9 copies. VAV 01 to 010. Might rename that one so that it's VAV 10 instead of 010. Yep. Now, what that means is that VAV 01 is using this, and 02 and 03 and 04. They're all using the same graphic, which is this graphic here, VAV graphic. These ones, which we had from before, we can get rid of. Click, delete. So we go to VAV 01 and we edit the graphic, and just so we relocate that and put it over here, I save it. Then I look at VAV number 2. Looking at VAV number 2, it's in that new location, right? VAV number 3, It's in that new location. Okay, if I edit this, put it back to where it should be. And save it. So they're all using the same VAV. Okay. Sorry, they're all using the same graphic. We have a common graphic that's being used by all our VAVs. If we want to edit that graphic, we can see how that works. In that this is our zone temperature sensor on the graphic, and this is the binding. So this is how we map the point onto the graphic. All right. And the binding says slot points, zone temperature, out value. Okay. If we look at here, VAV points. ZN-T. Points, ZN dash, so the $2D means dash. So by associating this graphic to VAV01, we can use the reference points zone dash temperature, zone ZN dash T, so points ZN dash T. So this reference is relative to VAV01. If I go and launch it from here, it's now referencing VAV02 or VAV04, 07, VAV10. Okay. So the same graphic being used over and over again. Just using relative binding to bind these points. If we do the same thing for the air handling unit, look at the air handling unit, look at that property sheet, AX property sheet. It's got a reference to a graphic, and it's a graphic called graphic -01. So if we look down here in our graphics file, we've got a set of graphics here called AHU. Okay, that's this graphic here. If we just rename that to AHU graphic, and we rename this one to AHU HX. Okay, now we've got a standard graphic. We go back. So now we can't, this fails because it's got the wrong reference. But if we go in here to our property sheet, graphic, AHU graphic, and we save it. Same for the HX graphic. We can also go looking in here. The graphics. AHU HX. Like that, and save it. So now, when we go back to AHU, we're seeing the similar graphic. Now, just say we wanted to edit this graphic. This is, so that name there is coming from that name there. Okay, so what if we wanted to duplicate that? But instead of AHU, we wanted to bind it to level 1 instead. Okay. Go OK. It's level 1, so it's the AHU level 1. We save it. Okay. So AHU level 1, VAV. We want to do a similar thing for the VAV. So we file new tab. So we've now got 2 tabs open. Put the AHU in that one. We go edit, copy that, go here, go edit. Can we paste it? No, we can't paste. It's not that easy. Oh, so we resize that. We duplicate it like we did. We'll do the same thing. We double click. And we choose level 1. Okay, okay. So there's level 1 for our VAV. So save that. So the AHU level 1, VAV level 1, VAV2 level 1, and so on, yeah? All good? We right click on level 1 and we duplicate. It's now level 2. All right. Double click on AHU. It says AHU, but it says level 2. All right. So let's edit that graphic. And if we look at this point here, the binding says station slot drivers all the way down. It's got the full path. And the full path is to level 1. So we could just change it to level 2 and go OK. OK, OK. Fixed. All right. So now when we go back here, on level 1 we see level 2. On level 2 we see level 2. So it's sort of not working, right? Now, the reason is, so because they're sharing the same graphic, we change this one and we break this one, okay? Now, if we edit this graphic again and we look at this binding, It's this full path, so it's always going to be bound to level 2. So it doesn't matter whether we launch it on this air handling unit or this air handling unit or any air handling unit, it'll always refer back to level 2 for this particular point. Okay, now over on the right hand side here, we've got a, so let's just, before we do this, let's grab this. Let's just copy that. We'll just put it on a, so that's our binding, all the way down to level 2. Now, back in our editor, close this. Over on the right hand side, we've got a thing called the bound ords. Okay, so this is all of the points in this graphic and their binding. Okay, now this point here, so if we select that one, we're looking at this guy here. So as we go down selecting these, you can see where the binding is. Okay, if we go to this guy, level 2, his binding is a lot longer, right? It's the full path. Up here, you've got a tool called Relativize Ords. If I select that option, it changes this long binding to this short binding. And this is where we just got to be a little bit careful. We won't do it this way. Okay, let's back up the truck a bit. And if we look at the air handling unit on level 1, we're seeing level 2. If we look at AHU level 2, we're seeing level 2. So this is correct. This is what we want to see. When we edit this graphic, or we look at the relativized ords, that long reference gets changed to this short reference, and we go OK. So now this guy, his binding is just slot : ... Okay, we save it, we go up to level 1, and we see level 1. We go down to level 2, we see level 2. Level 1, level 2. So the same graphic, the difference being that, when we bind this point, it says slot ... which basically means start at the point we launched it at, and then ... means go up one level. So it starts here, goes up to the parent, which is level 2. If we launched it from here, it would go up and select level 1. just say we also want it, instead of saying level 2, we want it to say building A. Okay. Let's say we duplicate that, put it down here, double click, and we want to go up to building A. Okay, 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 building A. We look at our ords here, building A, so it's going a full reference. If instead we relativize that ord, it gets replaced by slot dot dot slash dot dot. So go up one and then one more. We change it to that, go OK. So now AHU level 1, building A. AHU level 2, building A. If we went to building A and we duplicated it, we called it building C, AHU level 1, building C. Okay, AHU level 1, building A. Level 2, building A. Level 2, building C. Okay. Similar sort of thing for the VAVs. This is the level 1 VAV. Looking at a level 2 VAV, it still says level 1. Let's go back to the level 1 VAV. We edit it. This is our slot at the moment, or our binding. At the moment, it goes all the way, it's the full path. Instead, we can relativize it so that it's slot dot dot. Go OK. Save it. Level 1, level 1, level 2, level 2. Building C, level 1, level 2. Okay. So that's kind of, we've come up against the end of time. Is there any, this is probably a good place to finish. Is there any questions on any of that?
None for me. Anybody else has any questions? So David, according to the timetable, I mean the schedule, we were supposed to do Modbus today.
Yeah, I
cover
think the
that
plan
tomorrow.
was to do Modbus tomorrow. So Modbus on
All right.
Friday and Niagara networks on Friday.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some questions. There's one question in the chat.
Yep.
David, could we create tailor-made graphics?
Yes, you can. So you can either start with a blank graphic, or you can start with, so this is the standard graphic that we got as part of that import process. And so everything on this graphic is, these are just standard elements, right? So we can create our own, we can move stuff around and so on. So yeah, you could create any graphic you like in here. You can start with a blank page and you can bind points. So we will talk about graphics as its own subject next week. So yeah, you definitely can create your own standard, your own graphics, and you can, everything we've done here will work with standard, with your own custom graphics. Yeah. And the same ideas apply in that this is your new standard graphic with the duct all over the place. We go to level 1, we see the same. Go back to level 2, we go to building C. We're all sharing that single graphic. So the good thing is, if we edit that single graphic, we fix it once and it fixes it everywhere. And then we can save it. And now everywhere we go, we're seeing the new graphic as we'd expect. So yes, you definitely can create your own custom graphics. And we'll cover that in a lot more detail in next week as one of the sessions. So the plan for next week is to have the same 4 sessions on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday and Friday. So far, this is what we're planning, is Monday will be automation using wire sheets and schedules. Then Tuesday is for graphics. Thursday is for point extensions. Friday is more details around Niagara networks and how to set up an FX server. So that's the plan for next week. I'll put out some invites to those sessions, and it'll be the same time for Monday, Tuesday, Thursday and Friday next week. So if there's no other questions, might call it a day, yeah? And we'll see you back here tomorrow.
Yeah, good session, David.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, David.
Thanks everyone for coming. We'll
Thank you,
continue
David.
tomorrow.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, Jing.
Thanks, David.
Thank you, David.
See you. Goodbye.
See you. Okay.
Thank you, David.